Welcome back to the deep dive. You know, there are some stories that are they're embedded in the operating system of our culture.
Yeah.
You don't even really remember learning them for the first time. They're just sort of there, running in the
A
background.
cultural background radiation or something.
Exactly. And one of the really big ones, I mean, maybe the biggest one when it comes to how we think about gender or, curiosity or just the reason why life is kind of hard sometimes, is the story of Pandora.
The girl at the box.
The girl, the box, the mistake. It's
Yeah.
the ultimate oops moment in all of mythology, right?
Right.
I think the version I learned in grade school, and I'm going to bet it's the version you listening right now probably know, is that she was this innocent, beautiful girl.
Mm-hmm.
She gets a mysterious box as a wedding gift. She's told, don't open it by like a grumpy husband or a god, but she just can't help herself.
The curiosity is too much.
It's too much. She takes a peek, lets all the sin and misery out in the world, says, my bad, and that's the story.
And that's that. It's a classic cautionary tale. Curiosity killed the cat, or, in this case, curiosity doomed the entire human race to eternal suffering. It's framed as a story about a lack of self-control.
But, as we do on this show, I started pulling at the threads of this. I went back to the original source code. And I have to say, I was actually shocked. I really was. Because the story I just told, it isn't just simplified.
No.
It's almost completely wrong.
It's the Mandela effect of mythology. It really is. We all collectively remember a story that doesn't actually exist in the ancient texts.
It's so true.
Yeah.
Because when you actually look at the text, we're talking specifically about Hesiod, the guy who wrote this down around 700 BC. The whole vibe isn't, oops, it's not an accident. There was no box.
Yeah.
And Pandora, she wasn't just a girl who made a simple mistake.
No. In the original text, Pandora isn't a character in a drama. She's a manufactured product. She's a tactical strike.
That is the phrase that just blew my mind. We're going to get deep into this. But the way Hesiod describes her creation, I mean, it reads less like a birth and more like a weapons program.
That's a perfect framing for it. If you look at the context, this ongoing war between Zeus and Prometheus Pandora is the payload in a very complex cosmic Cold War. She is a trap. And the scariest part?
What's that?
She worked perfectly.
So today our mission is to deconstruct the first woman. We're going to open up the ancient texts, specifically Hesiod's Theogony and his works and days. We're going to look at the Renaissance mistranslations that accidentally gave us the box. We're going to ask some really, really uncomfortable questions about hope.
And we're going to look at the archaeological record, too, because there's literal physical evidence on pottery that suggests Pandora started out as something completely different, something much more powerful before the poets got their hands on her.
Okay, so let's start at the beginning, or I guess not the beginning of Pandora, but the context.
Yeah.
Because she didn't just appear out of nowhere. She was a response to a crisis.
Right. To understand Pandora, you have to understand the political situation in the cosmos at that exact moment. We're talking about the feud between Zeus, the king of the Olympians, and the Titan, Prometheus.
Prometheus.
Yeah.
The guy who stole fire, the classic story.
Yes. But we need to pause on that for a second, because when we say he stole fire, I think for a modern listener, you picture a campfire, or maybe, a torch.
Right. Some flames in a fennel stalk, I think, is the detail.
That's the one. But in the mythological context, fire isn't just heat. Hesiod calls it the mains of life. It is technology. It's the hardware of civilization.
So before Prometheus stole this, what were humans just?
Yeah.
What? Existing. Huddling in the dark.
They were existing in a state of total dependency. They were like pets to the gods. They were cold, they ate raw food, they had no metallurgy, no advanced crafts, no way to cook or build. By giving them fire, Prometheus gave them the capacity for industry. He gave them the tools to become independent from the gods.
It's like leaking the source code of the universe to the end users.
That's a great way to put it. It allowed humans to essentially challenge the divine administration. From Zeus's point of view, it was a massive security breach. And Zeus, he isn't just annoyed by this, he is threatened.
Because if humans have their own tech, they don't really need Zeus as much anymore. Is that the idea?
Precisely. And Zeus is a jealous administrator. He runs the show. You have to look at the quote from Hesiod in Works and Days. Zeus speaks directly to Prometheus and says, "You are glad that you have outwitted me and stolen fire. A great plague to you yourself and to men that shall be."
A plague. He's already framing the technology itself as the problem. Not the theft, but the tech.
And then he says, and listen, this is the key line, But I will give men as the price for fire an evil thing in which they may all be glad of heart while they embrace their own destruction.
Wow. Glad of heart while they embrace their own destruction. That's chilling. It sounds like he's describing an addiction.
It is a psychological trap. Hesiod says Zeus laughs aloud while he's planning this. This isn't just a fit of rage where he throws a thunderbolt. He wants to inflict a price for the blessing. He wants to corrupt the entire system from the inside out.
So his strategy isn't a frontal assault. He doesn't send a monster like Typhon or a flood, at least not yet.
No.
He decides to use a Trojan horse.
Precisely. Think about it strategically. If he sends a monster, humans will use that new fire to forge swords and fight it. They'll innovate.
Right.
If he sends a plague directly, they might use the fire to boil water and create sanitation. But if he sends something beautiful, something desirable, something they want,
They'll bring it right into their homes. They'll install the malware themselves.
and that malware is Pandora.
That's Pandora.
She is the direct countermove to the theft of fire, the patch to fix the human independence bug.
Okay, let's get into the actual construction, the manufacturing of Pandora.
Yeah.
Because this is one of the wildest parts of the text. In the storybook version, she's there. But Hesiod gives us a literal spec sheet.
It's the first bespoke creation in human history. She's not born, she is engineered. Zeus acts as the project manager, but he outsources the actual development to the other Olympians. He assembles a team of specialists.
It really does read like a product launch. So let's walk through the team he assembled. First up, you've got Hephaestus.
The divine smith, the lead engineer. Zeus orders him to mix earth with water.
Right. So she's made of clay.
She's molded from clay. This is really significant because it connects her to the material earth. She's a construct, not a divine being.
But he doesn't just make a statue, right? It says he gives her a voice.
Yes. The instruction from Zeus is to put in the voice and strength of humankind and to fashion her into the shape of a lovely maiden, specifically likening her face to the immortal goddesses.
So the chassis, if you will, is built to look divine.
It mimics the gods, it passes the visual test, but underneath it's just wet mud. It's an imitation.
So it's a mimic. It looks like a goddess, but it's fragile and artificial.
Then, once the body is formed, she moves down the assembly line to Athena.
Athena, the goddess of wisdom.
And of crafts. In this case, specifically weaving, Athena is cast with teaching Pandora needlework and weaving. And she clothes her. Hesiod describes silvery raiment and an embroidered veil, a wonder to see.
Now, wait a second. Why weaving?
Yeah.
If she's a trap, why would you give her a useful skill? Wouldn't it be a better trap if she was, like, completely useless?
That's a fantastic question. You have to understand the economy of Hesiod's world. In ancient Greece, weaving was the primary economic contribution of a woman in the household. It produced textiles, clothing.
Is a productive skill.
It was. So by giving her the skill, Athena is essentially programming her to pass inspection. She needs to look like a productive asset so that the target, Prometheus, will accept her into his home.
Ah, so it's camouflage. She looks like a wife. She looks like a contributing partner.
Exactly. She functions just enough to be accepted into the system. But
Right.
then she gets to Aphrodite, and this is where the weaponization really kicks into high gear.
Aphrodite, the goddess of love. What's her contribution to the project?
Aphrodite sheds grace upon her head, but, and this is the crucial part, she also instills cruel longing and cares that weary the limbs.
Cruel longing. That doesn't sound like romance. That sounds painful.
It isn't romance, it's a biological weapon. She is designed to be irresistible. She triggers a desire that is physically exhausting. The phrase, cares that weary the limbs, implies that the man who falls for her will be physically drained by it.
So it's a consumption of his energy.
A total consumption. If Prometheus gave man fire to make him strong and productive, Aphrodite is installing a feature that makes him weak and distracted.
It's a resource drain. She captivates you and you lose your drive to do anything else. Your focus is just gone.
And then, just to make sure the trap is sprung perfectly, the final piece of the core programming comes from Hermes.
The trickster god, the messenger, the spin doctor.
Hermes is responsible for the software of her personality, the operating system. Zeus orders him to put in a shameless mind and a deceitful nature.
Whoa. A deceitful nature. So lying is a feature, not a bug.
It is her primary function. Hermes specifically gives her the power of speech, a voice, for the explicit purpose to tell lies.
So her words are designed to mislead.
Always. And Hesiod adds this little detail that the graces and persuasion, the goddess Pithos put gold necklaces on her.
She is literally adorned with persuasion.
She is built to convince you that she is good, that she's a blessing, while her internal programming is permanently set to deceit. It is the ultimate bait and switch.
And then finally, the Horae, the seasons. They crown her with spring flowers. She represents the springtime, the bloom, a new beginning. Everything about her visual presentation says life.
But her internal purpose is pure destruction.
And all this brings us to her name, Pandora. All gifts.
Pandoros. Because all the Olympians gave her a gift. That's the common explanation.
Right. But as we've just gone through it, the realization I had, and I think you caught it too, is that those gifts, the beauty, the persuasion, the voice, they weren't gifts for her. And they certainly weren't gifts for humanity.
No. They were the components of the weapon. The name all gifts is deeply ironic. She is the container for the Olympians' collective vengeance. Hesiod explicitly calls the final product a plague to men who eat bread.
Men who eat bread, meaning mortals, farmers, workers.
The very people Prometheus tried to help.
There's another metaphor Hesiod uses that I think we have to spend some time on, because it really explains why he thinks she is such a plague. It's what you call the drone metaphor.
Yeah, and this is where the foundational misogyny of the text becomes completely explicit. And we have to remember, Hesiod was a farmer. His life was about scarcity. He was obsessed with how hard it is to get enough food to survive the winter. Work and toil were everything.
So how does the bee metaphor work for him in that context?
He writes that men are like worker bees. They go out all day into the fields. They brave the sun, the rain. They work until sunset. They produce the honey, the surplus food, the wealth.
And the women, what are they in this analogy?
In Hesiod's worldview, women who all descend from Pandora are the drones. They stay inside the covered hives, which are the houses, and they reap the toil of others into their own bellies.
Wow. So in Hesiod's economic model, a woman is just a stomach, a resource sink, a mouth to feed that doesn't work the fields.
Essentially, yes. Before Pandora, men presumably just existed. Maybe they just sprang from the earth or were made by Prometheus, and they kept 100% of their output. Pandora introduces a permanent resource drain on the household. She eats the food, but in his view, doesn't do the primary production work.
But hold on, didn't you just say Athena taught her weaving? That's work. That has real economic value.
It does, and historically, women's labor in the home was absolutely vital. But to Hesiod, that domestic work didn't offset the cost of feeding her. He just sees her as a net loss. He describes Pandora as a pema, which means a woe, a calamity, and a snare not to be withstood by men.
So the trap works in two ways then. If you marry her, she drains your resources. So why not just stay single? Avoid the whole thing.
Hesiod has an answer for that, too. It's a brilliant part of the trap's design. He says if you avoid marriage to escape the troublesome women, you reach deadly old age without anyone to tend his years.
No one to take care of you.
No children. And when you die, your kinsfolk, your cousins and your nephews, they just swoop in and divide up your possessions. Your legacy is gone.
You can't win. It's a perfect double bind.
It's a perfect system of misery designed by Zeus. You either suffer the bidirectional combat of marriage, as Hesiod sees it, where you're constantly fighting to feed this drone, or you suffer a lonely death and the complete loss of your legacy.
Zeus really thought this through. He wanted to make sure that the fire, that technology, didn't actually make life easier in the long run. He wanted to add a degree of difficulty that would balance it out forever.
Exactly. He introduced a permanent maintenance cost to the human species that would eat up all the surplus the fire ever provided.
Okay, so the weapon is built, Pandora is online, now comes the deployment phase.
The target is selected, Epimetheus.
Epimetheus. Prometheus's brother. We can't just gloss over their names, right? The names are everything here.
Crucial. Prometheus means forethought. He thinks ahead, he runs the simulations, he sees the consequences before they happen.
And Epimetheus means afterthought.
Or hindsight. He's the guy who figures things out only after they've already happened. The one who says, oh, maybe that wasn't such a good idea.
Which makes him the perfect mark for a con. The perfect target.
And Prometheus knew this. He had specifically warned Epimetheus never, ever to accept a gift from Olympian Zeus. He knew Zeus wouldn't let the fire theft slide. He told him, send any gift back, don't even open the door.
But then Hermes, the divine messenger, shows up. And he's got Pandora.
And remember, she's adorned by Aphrodite's grace and the goddess persuasion. She looks like a blessing. She's engineered to be the most desirable thing a man could ever imagine. Epimetheus takes one look at her, and his afterthought nature kicks in.
He's not thinking.
He's not thinking about the consequences at all. He accepts her.
And Hesiod writes this line that is just so tragic. He says, when the evil thing was already his, he understood.
That is the tragedy of Epimetheus in a nutshell. He only understands the danger once the malware is already installed on the hard drive and running.
Now, we have to talk about the gift that she brought with her, the container. Because for centuries, we have called it Pandora's box. If you ask anyone on the street, they will say she opened a box. But you're telling me that's a translation error.
It is one of the most famous and I think most impactful mistranslations in all of Western literature. In the original Greek text, Hesiod uses the word pithos.
Pithos. Okay, so what does a pithos look like? Describe it for me, because I'm picturing a wooden chest.
Get that image out of your head. It is not a little jewelry box you can hold in your lap. A pithos is a massive ceramic storage jar. We are talking something 4 or 5 feet tall, maybe bigger.
Wow.
The walls are thick, heavy clay. They were used in the ancient world to store wine or olive oil or grain in huge quantities. They were often half buried in the floor of a house to keep the contents cool.
So this is a huge object. It's basically a piece of furniture, or like a small silo.
It's a silo, and there's an even darker association. Pithoi were sometimes used as coffins. They were used for burials.
Whoa. Okay, that changes the visual completely. A box suggests a little mystery, a keepsake, something you can hold. A pithos suggests a granary or a grave.
Exactly. It suggests a heavy burden, something you can't easily move or hide. It just sits in your house, taking up space, demanding your attention.
So how did we get from pithos to box? Who messed that up?
We can point the finger at the great humanist scholar Erasmus of Rotterdam. In the 16th century, he was translating Hesiod's Greek story into Latin, and he mistook the Greek word pithos for pyxis.
And pyxis means?
A pyxis is a small box or a casket, usually for holding jewelry or cosmetics, a personal item.
And because Erasmus was so influential, his translation, the box, just stuck.
It did, and it completely changed the psychology of the myth over the next 500 years. Think about it. A box implies something that tempts your curiosity. It's manageable. It feels like a small lapse in judgment to just, take a little peek. Oh, what's in here?
Right. But a pithos. Hesiod says she removed the great lid. That sounds like heavy work.
It is. This would have been a heavy ceramic or stone slab. She didn't just peek, she deliberately uncorked it. It feels less like, oops, I took a look, and more like a deliberate unsealing of a massive container.
So let's go to that moment. She's in the house of Epimetheus. She goes to this massive jar.
And this is where the trap executes its primary payload. Before this moment, Hesiod tells us that the tribes of men lived on Earth remote and free from ills and hard toil and heavy sickness.
They were running on what I call the beta version of immortality. No disease, no aging, no backbreaking labor.
Right. They had the fire, they had the tech, and they had apparently no downsides yet, but then Pandora removes the great lid from the Pithos, and she scatters the contents.
And what comes flying out?
Countless plagues. Hesiod is very clear. He says the earth is full of evils and the sea is full. He describes diseases specifically. And here's a detail that I find truly unsettling. He says the diseases come silently by day and night.
Silently. Why is that detail in there?
Because, he says, why Zeus took away their speech.
That is terrifying. You can't hear them coming. There's no warning.
Think about the psychological implication. If a wolf attacks you, it growls, you can hear it, you can react or run or fight. But a silent plague, a virus that has no voice, you can't negotiate with it, you can't reason with it, it just arrives and destroys.
It just emphasizes the total inescapability of Zeus's punishment. We're just sitting ducks.
Completely.
And in Hesiod's original version, it's Pandora who is actively scattering them. But I noticed in the notes that there are other later versions where the blame shifts a little bit.
Yes. In later fables, like those attributed to Aesop, which came much, much later, the misogyny is sometimes dialed back slightly, or maybe shifted is a better word. In some of those versions, it's the husband who opens the jar.
Oh, really? Why does he do it?
Out of greed or impatience, he can't control his impulse to see what supplies are inside. He thinks it's food. He thinks it's wine or grain. He wants to know what he's got.
Interesting. So the fatal flaw of curiosity or greed bounces back and forth between the man and the woman, depending on the storytelling.
Exactly. But in the source code in Hesiod, it is absolutely Pandora. And he doesn't explicitly say she was curious. He just says she took off the lid and scattered them. Given that she was programmed by Hermes with a deceitful nature, you could absolutely argue she was simply executing her function.
She was just running her program.
She was designed to release the payload. She was the delivery system. The jar was just the casing.
Okay, so the evils are out. The world is ruined. Sickness, toil, death. It's all happening now. But then there's the paradox, the big twist, the one thing left in the jar.
Elpis. Hope.
This is the part of the story that always confuses people.
Yeah.
I remember asking my teacher in school, why is hope in a jar full of evils? And also, why did it stay inside?
This is the great debate of this myth. Scholars have been arguing about this for more than 2,000 years. It is the central ambiguity of the human condition as the Greeks saw it. There are two main theories, and they are completely opposed.
Okay, lay them on me.
Theory A is what we can call the pantry theory. You use a jar, a Pithos, to store and keep things safe. So, in this reading, when Pandora opened the jar, all the evils escaped, which is bad. But she slammed the lid down just in time to save hope for humanity.
So in that version, hope is a reserve. It's a blessing that we managed to keep safe from the disaster.
That's the optimistic reading. It suggests that Zeus, or perhaps one of the other gods, wanted to leave us with one lifeline, one small comfort to get us through the misery.
But does that really make sense?
The entire thing was a gift from Zeus, who was laughing while he planned our destruction. Why would he include a lifeline in a biological weapon? It seems out of character.
Exactly. That is the massive hole in the pantry theory. And that leads us directly to theory B, the prison theory.
The jar was a prison for evils. If something is in the jar, it is by definition a bad thing. Therefore, Elpis' hope is also an evil.
Whoa. Wait. Hope is an evil. How can hope possibly be an evil?
Think about it. In ancient Greek thought, Elpis doesn't just mean positive expectation, like it does for us. It can also mean blind expectation or delusion. If you are hoping for something that is never going to happen, are you helping yourself? Or are you just prolonging your own suffering?
You're suffering longer. You're not fixing the problem.
Right. So if hope had escaped from the jar, it might be out in the world, battering us just like the diseases are, constantly giving us false expectations. That's one way to put it. But the more cynical reading, and the one that really fits the social engineering perspective, is that keeping it inside the jar is the final, most brilliant curse.
How so? How is keeping hope away from us a curse?
Imagine you're a manager, a cruel, cosmic manager like Zeus, who needs his workers to keep toiling away in absolutely terrible conditions. If the conditions are pure, unadulterated misery with zero chance of improvement, what will the workers do? They might revolt. Or they might just give up and die. They stop being productive.
Right. Total despair makes you unproductive. If I know I'm going to fail no matter what, I won't even start.
What if you give them hope? A tiny, irrational sliver of blind hope that maybe tomorrow will be better, or maybe the harvest will be good this year, or maybe the gods will smile on me. What happens then?
They keep working. They keep grinding through the misery.
Oh, that is dark. So hope is the patch that keeps the whole broken system running. It's the feature that prevents humanity from just opting out of Zeus's cruel world.
Exactly. It keeps us compliant. We accept the hard toil and the heavy sickness because we have this little voice inside saying, it might get better. It basically turns us into a perpetual motion machine of suffering, powered by delusion. And looking at our sources, there's a connection to the playwright Aeschylus here, right? Another Greek writer had a take on this.
Yes. In the play Prometheus Bound, which was written much later than Hesiod's work, Prometheus actually claims that he is the one who gave humans hope.
Prometheus did, not Zeus.
In this version, yes. He's listing all the gifts he gave to humanity besides fire, and he says he stopped mortals from foreseeing their doom.
And how did he do that?
By placing blind hopes in their breasts. His argument is that if you knew the exact moment and the exact manner of your death, you might be paralyzed by fear. You couldn't live a full life. Blind hope allows you to live as if you are immortal, even though you were completely doomed.
So whether it comes from Zeus as a curse or from Prometheus as a gift, hope is essentially a delusion, an anesthetic that allows us to cope with the certainty of suffering and death.
Precisely. It's the anesthetic that allows the painful surgery of life to continue without the patient screaming.
Man, I am never going to look at one of those hang in there kitty posters the same way ever again. That is heavy.
His light laugh. It is. Greek mythology does not pull its punches.
So let's pivot a little bit. Because up until now, we've been deep in the Hesiod version, which is, very patriarchal, very Zeus is the boss, very women are a resource drain. But you sent me some notes about the archaeological record that suggest Pandora wasn't always this villain.
This is where the story gets really fascinating for me, because myths aren't static things carved in stone. They evolve. And sometimes a newer myth completely overwrites an older one. It's like saving a new file over an old draft and losing the original.
The overwrite theory. So what was under the Hesiod version? What was the original draft to Pandora?
There's a very compelling theory, championed by scholars like Jane Ellen Harrison, that Pandora was originally a powerful earth goddess.
An earth goddess.
A little like Gaia.
Very similar. In fact, think about her name again. Pandora. We said it means all gifts. Hesiod spins that to mean all the gods gave her gifts to make her. But linguistically, it can also mean the all-giving.
Ah, she who gives all gifts to the world, not she who is made of gifts. Exactly, the bountiful earth itself, which gives us grain and fruit and life. And we have visual evidence for this. There's a famous white ground kylix, a type of pottery cup from about 460 BC. It actually shows the creation scene. Hephaestus and Athena are there, making the first woman, but she isn't labeled Pandora.
What is she labeled as?
Anesidora.
Anesidora. And what does that mean?
She who sends up gifts. And that phrasing, sends up, specifically implies sending them up from the underworld, from within the earth.
Like crops or trees or the renewal of life in the spring?
Yes. So the theory goes that in older, probably pre-patriarchal agrarian traditions, there was a jar, a pithos, but it held blessings. It held grain, wine, oil, seeds, and the goddess was the one who opened it to feed humanity.
So the jar was a pantry, not a prison. It was a silo of good things.
It was a cornucopia, exactly.
And Hesiod, he just flipped it. He inverted the entire story.
He inverted it. And this is a common tactic when a new religious order takes over. You have the Olympian religion Zeus, the male sky god taking over the older, earth-based, often female-centric religions. So how do you discredit the old gods?
You demonize them. You turn their stories into stories about evil.
You take the all-giving Mother Earth and you rebrand her as the all-gifted source of human misery. You take her jar of plenty and you turn it into a jar of plagues. You essentially run a divine smear campaign on the divine feminine.
He demoted her from a goddess to a product, from a force of nature to a manufactured object.
And he changed the narrative so that the gifts of life were actually punishments in disguise.
There's also this image in the art of the Anados, right? I saw some of the pictures of the vases you sent.
Yes, the Anados scene. In many vase paintings, you see Pandora literally rising out of the ground. She'll be waist-deep in the earth, holding her arms up to the sky as if she's emerging.
Which looked a lot more like a birth from the earth than it does Hephaestus molding a statue in his workshop.
It absolutely does. It looks like vegetation rising in the spring. Sometimes she's even surrounded by satyrs who are holding hammers.
Hammers? What are they doing with hammers?
This is likely a reference to a lost play by Sophocles called The Hammerers. We don't have the script anymore, but the image suggests they're hammering on the earth to wake her up, to summon the spring.
So in that tradition, she's not a weapon. She's the personification of springtime.
Originally, yes. She is the renewal of life. Hesiod took that powerful image of the beautiful woman rising from the earth, and he stripped away her divinity, leaving only the beautiful shell to be used as a weaponized container.
It's pretty wild how these visual clues can survive in the art, even when the dominant text tries to bury the original meaning.
That's the beauty of archaeology. The pottery sometimes tells a different story than the poetry. The pottery remembers the goddess.
Speaking of survival and legacy, let's talk genealogy. Because even in Hesiod's Grimm version, Pandora isn't a dead end. She has a child.
She does. And this is deeply ironic. Despite being a trap and a resource drain, she and Prometheus have a daughter. And her name is Pyrrha.
Pyrrha,
Yeah.
which means fire or fiery.
Fiery or
Yeah.
red-haired. It connects her lineage directly back to the original theft of fire. The legacy continues.
And who does Pyrrha, daughter of the trap, marry?
She marries her cousin, Deucalion, who happens to be the son of Prometheus.
So the forethought line and the afterthought line merge. The children of the brilliant Titan and the children of the beautiful trap get married.
They do. And they become the single most important couple in human history, according to the Greeks. Because Zeus eventually decides the Trojan horse wasn't enough. The malware didn't kill humanity fast enough for his liking, so he decides to just wipe the slate clean with a flood.
The Great Deluge.
And Pyrrha and Deucalion build an ark, or actually a chest in the myth, and they survive. When the waters recede, they are the only two humans left alive. They repopulate the entire earth by throwing stones over their shoulders, which then turn into men and women.
So technically, according to Greek myth, we are all descendants of Pandora.
We are. Her source code is in all of us. Which, if you buy Hesiod's drone argument, is why life is so full of toil. But if you look at the older myth, it means we are all children of the earth gift.
I think I like the Earth Gift version a little better.
Me too.
Yeah.
It gives us a little more agency, you know?
Let's move into the final section here, the legacy. How did Pandora transform from this divine malware in a 2,700-year-old text into the curious girl we all think we know today? Because when I think of Pandora, the first parallel my mind jumps to isn't a robot, it's Eve.
And that is exactly why the story changed. The Eve connection is absolutely massive in her reception history.
Well, break that down for us.
The early church fathers, writers like Tertullian and Origen, they were looking at Greek and Roman myths, and they saw these incredible parallels. They were trying to make sense of pagan culture through a Christian lens. And here you have the story of the first woman. She is made from the earth, from clay. She brings about the end of a golden age, which looks a lot like the Garden of Eden. She succumbs to a temptation involving a forbidden container. She's responsible for bringing sin, death, and suffering into the world.
It matches up almost beat for beat. It's uncanny.
It is. And artists, especially during the Renaissance, loved this parallel. There's a famous painting by Jean Cousin called Eva Prima Pandora, Eve the First Pandora.
I've seen that one.
It shows a single woman lounging in a cave. She's got a skull next to her representing death and Eve's sin, and she's leaning on a jar representing Pandora.
So they just merged the files. They flattened all the nuance of the Greek story to fit their narrative.
They merged the file to reinforce a specific theological point. That woman is the gateway to sin. It cemented Pandora's reputation as a villain whose own weakness, her curiosity, caused the fall, rather than seeing her as a programmed victim of a divine plot.
But then later on in the Victorian era, it shifts again. It seems to stop being about capital S sin and starts being about quaintness or domestic tragedy.
Yes, that's a great way to put it. As we move out of the purely religious framework and into the Romantic period and the Victorian era, the harshness of the divine trap kind of fades away. You get playwrights and poets who want to make this a human drama.
It becomes less about Zeus's cosmic vengeance and more about her internal psychological struggle.
Exactly. The story becomes entirely about female curiosity as a character flaw. You get plays and poems where she is just this innocent, naive girl who is told, don't touch that, and she's just dying to know what's inside.
It becomes a Bluebeard story, the Forbidden Room.
Very much so. Longfellow wrote a version. It becomes a tragedy of innocence lost, a cautionary tale for young girls, rather than a tactical strike by an angry god. It completely domesticates the myth.
And Voltaire did a version too.
Voltaire and Calderon both wrote plays about her. And they did something interesting. They mashed her story up with the Pygmalion myth.
The sculptor who falls in love with his statue.
Right, because Pandora was a statue come to life. In these versions, it becomes a romance. The man falls in love with his beautiful creation. It softens her completely. She stops being a beautiful evil and starts being a beautiful, tragic, romantic figure.
It's really amazing how the whole malware aspect got scrubbed from the popular version over time. We totally forgot that she was programmed to do it.
We did. We focused on the action opening the box, and we forgot to read the design specs. We forgot who built her, and more importantly, why.
So let's try to wrap this deep dive up. We started with the idea that Pandora was a mistake. A simple story about curiosity. But the source code tells us she was a mission.
She was the price of fire. Prometheus gave us the hardware of civilization. Zeus gave us the software of suffering to make sure we could never fully enjoy it.
And the box was never a box. It was a massive storage jar, a Pithos, maybe even a representation of a grave filled with the voiceless, silent plagues that still haunt us today.
And hope. Hope is the ultimate wild card. It's either the one mercy Zeus left us, or it's the cruelest mechanism of control that keeps us trapped in the simulation of suffering.
Which brings us to the final thought, the question that really sticks with me. We always ask, why did she open it?
Yeah.
We blame her curiosity, her nature. But if she was engineered by Hephaestus, programmed with deceit by Hermes, and weaponized by Aphrodite, did she ever really have a choice?
I would argue she didn't. She executed her code perfectly. She was designed to fail so that Zeus could win. The blame lies with the manufacturer, not the product.
And here's the question that is going to keep me up tonight. If that jar, the Pithos, contained all the evils, and everything evil flew out and scattered across the world, and only hope stayed inside.
Yeah.
Does that mean hope is the only thing that isn't out there in the world with us? I mean, is the jar the only place where hope actually exists, and because it's sealed, do we actually have access to it at all?
That is the terrifying possibility, isn't it? Maybe the world is full of evils because they were set free. And maybe we fundamentally lack hope because it's the only thing that's still locked away.
On that cheery note, thanks for listening to The Deep Dive.
Don't lose hope, even if it's stuck in a jar